Hello, and welcome to this video on automation provided by Privacy Labs. This is one we plan to do in a series. This is done primarily for your education, but also to give you a sense of how we deliver services and where we focus. This is focused on compliance. It is directed at a non-technical audience, and I should mention that automation is ubiquitous. It's not just in compliance. You will find topics like customer experience, CX, you might hear it as, which is a huge piece of remaining competitive for the modern enterprise. There is overlap, of course, with compliance, but that's our focus today. What we're going to do is focus first on what do we mean by manual versus automate. What does automation mean? Then we're going to look at two tools, two general areas where automation is executed. One is application programming interface, or API, and the other is a topic called third-party automation tools. We'll finish off with a discussion on machine learning. However, we will be having a separate video on machine learning, so watch for that. But we will cover it here, specifically in an area called data discovery. So what do we mean when we say automate? What does it mean to say manual versus automate? Well, it's a fairly obvious definition, and the one that we're going to use is automation is technology executing tasks instead of humans. It's really just that simple. And you don't automate unless you have a reason to. You don't automate just to automate. Modernly, that is very often the case. The best way I like to think of this is the human body. Think about yourself, your heart, your lungs, when you blink your eyes, your digestive system, all these things that your body does automatically for you. Imagine if you had to manually beat your heart or command your lungs to inhale and exhale or to blink your eyes. You would spend your entire time thinking about that. So what has been done is your body has automated what are simple and repetitive tasks. This is a very similar concept with automation in the context that we mean it. I want to introduce you to, though, to some terms: DevOps, AI ops, ML ops. DevOps is really software engineering development, and ops is operations, IT, the folks that handle your network and your repositories and your software solutions. AI ops is artificial intelligence ops, operations. ML ops is machine learning ops. These are just terms that have kind of grown up in the technical arena that you'll see mentioned often. And another area called robotic process automation, or RPA. You can search these terms on the internet and do your own research. They are there, and you will find that their primary purpose, the underlying concept, is to automate those things that are simple and straightforward first. So now that we have a better understanding of what automation means, let's take a closer look at what this means in the context of compliance. I'll be covering some examples soon, but for now at a high level, it's really just like any automation. It's to reduce cost and human error. However, it's very difficult for the modern enterprise to stay competitive if they aren't mitigating risks in the best way that they can. This often means automation. This is due in part to the fact that there's so many different types of data, different departments with different needs, lots of different software applications and repositories and edge devices and so forth. So automation really becomes key. This graphic kind of helps visualize what's going on. We have the cloud, we have desktops and laptops, we have smartphones, we have everything else, collaboration tools like Zoom and Slack. We have different departments: HR, research and development, marketing, IT. If you're an online presence like in e-commerce, you've got all that to think about. And this is essentially just a beehive of terabytes of fast-moving, complex data that needs to be managed and basically corralled, if you will. We're now going to cover two solution areas that we mentioned earlier. One is application programming interface. The other is third-party automation tools or solutions. Right now, we'll talk about application programming interface. You'll note here at the base of this slide I have two applications. It doesn't matter what they are, but for our sake, let's just say one is Salesforce and the other is Office 365. Now, these applications come with what's called an application programming interface that software engineers can use to automatically do things, to tap into the functionality of the application. You can also let them talk to other applications. This really starts with this API comes to the programmer with documentation, and then what they do is they build what's called a source code file. This is done in what's called an independent development environment that the programmer will use to write the code that comes with the application. It's nothing more than a text file. It's human readable. And it has things like variable names and function names and classes and other such things. But it's just a text file that's readable by humans. When the programmer's finished, that tool, the IDE, the independent development environment, will build an executable file that your server or your computer will understand so that it can execute what the API wants to do. So that if we have this Salesforce application that wants to have Office 365, say, send some emails to some new prospects, it will do that automatically. The software engineer simply writes the code in the source code file, generates an executable, and then drops this into the enterprise environment where it will do this. The application programming interface is a very flexible and powerful way to automate. The issue, though, is the person who's responsible for doing this automation has to be a programmer and in the language that's being offered, like Python or Java or C. These third-party automation platforms come to the rescue here. They are more a dashboard where you can drag and drop these icons that basically do the same thing. It doesn't mean you can't put a program inside one of these icons, but generally they're not meant to have that happen. This makes it a lot easier for more people to have their eyes on what's going on with the automation and to actually get involved. Let's use a quick example. Remember we talked about these two applications, Salesforce and Office 365. What a user of this platform might do is drag and drop something that says, gather all new uh, prospects in Salesforce. That'd be the first thing. Then it says, the next one might say, send these names over to Office 365. And then when they get to Office 365, send emails to all of the prospects. So rather than writing a software program, a source code text file, these drag and drop options are leveraged. If you want to do your own research, there's a company called Tray.io, Tray.io, Zapier, Zapier.com, if I said that right, and then MuleSoft, Mulesoft.com. Those are all such platforms if you want to learn more. But this is another very fast-growing and very powerful way to automate. So now we know what an API is and what a third-party automation tool is. Let's look though at how this is done in a way where a manual task would be automated. This is a very simple one and just one of many possible examples, but this is one that's not an uncommon one. You look here in the middle, we have this security engineer, and he or she is watching the security dashboard here for threats, and all of a sudden finds out that, oh my God, there's someone's trying to break into a server. This person, when that happens, is supposed to email the chief security officer and a number of other people to alert them, and then is also supposed to immediately log that information into a logging mechanism where it can be stored. Well, what happens though if one wants to automate this? Well, that's essentially what the API or third-party automation tool can do. Instead of requiring a human to do this, this can be done automatically. So that if an alert comes in, the emails are sent automatically and the logging happens at the same time. Now that we have an understanding of automation generally, no discussion of automation is complete without machine learning. We will have a video on this later, so please watch for that. We'll just cover this briefly here. The first and primary tenet, if you will, is you don't use machine learning unless you have a reason to. This is one of the biggest mistakes I think people make. So that would be the thing I would lead with here. There are two high-level areas of machine learning. There's unsupervised machine learning and supervised machine learning. There's also an area called rules-based automation. This is a little distinct from machine learning and it's more exact. It's more of a flow chart, more of an if-then-else approach. But it is automation and it does kind of follow the logic of machine learning in a sense. However, machine learning is more fuzzy generally. It's more based on statistics and probability. Some people call it the science of sort of or the science of almost. But we'll see more about that, how that comes as we discuss this more. And again, rules-based is often used in conjunction with machine learning. The first of our two areas of machine learning is unsupervised machine learning. And what we mean by unsupervised is just that the algorithm that you are using is going to go into a set of data for you and find patterns that are already there. It's unsupervised. It's a little bit of a misnomer because there is some human metrics that have to be decided at the front end, but that's the idea. Often it's used to remove irrelevant data. It finds patterns of data where it's not relevant. It also helps you understand what's in the data. And so that's the primary use of unsupervised machine learning. There's quite a bit more to this, which we'll cover again in another video. In the context, though, here, anomaly detection is considered to be probably the most commonly used form of unsupervised machine learning. Here, the idea is to define what's normal. The machine learning will determine that for you. What's a normal transaction? What is a normal email? What is a normal behavior of a human being or activity on a server or on a repository, what have you? If it's not normal, it's considered an anomaly, an outlier, and is therefore likely to be a threat or at least an error. Our second and final area of machine learning is supervised machine learning. We're going to do this very quickly. We'll cover this in another video, so this probably won't do it complete justice. But essentially what supervised machine learning is with supervised we mean that we already know what the data is. And from that, the machine learning algorithm will learn from this historical data, and then will learn those patterns as a way of predicting future classifications or events. So let's take a quick example. Let's say we have a spreadsheet with 1,000,000 transactions in it. In the far right column, we have what are called a label or a class. And in this case, each transaction of the 1,000,000 rows will have either a yes or a no as whether it's fraud or not. This is called a training set. It's basically telling the algorithm what is or is not fraudulent. In that way, it's supervised. So what the algorithm will do then is it will go in and look at the fraudulent transactions and find patterns. And it will look at the non-fraudulent patterns and look for patterns there. And it will then try to distinguish between the two. One of the banes of supervised machine learning is that the data is not sufficient. The data between the non-fraud and fraud are too similar, so it's hard for it to make predictions. So this is a common issue with supervised machine learning. But for our purposes, from a conceptual standpoint, it has this historical data that it learns from, and then in our example, it would say if we see a transaction, we hope to be able to tell whether it is or is not fraudulent. At least that's the goal. Automation and compliance technology is a very broad topic, and I won't presume to touch on that in any complete form here at all. At a high level, though, we do see that threat detection, risk mitigation is always the primary goal here. Alerting and logging are very often a major piece of this. Alerting so that the right people can be involved when something is found, and logging so that we can determine what happened and also establish what we've done to mitigate risk and to handle the enterprise environment. Any repetitive task can be leveraged. We will, though, touch specifically in greater detail an area called data discovery, which is really becoming a very important topic in privacy and compliance regulation. While we can't cover every example of how automation is used in the compliance area, there's one that bears mention in particular, and this has to do with what many call data discovery. These tools are built primarily for privacy and data protection laws, where you're required to track and manage private and sensitive and confidential data. It includes the ability to find trade secret information that you're supposed to protect as well, certainly. These platforms, these companies that offer these solutions, have tools that will automatically scan your systems, your laptops, your edge devices, your repositories, your applications like Salesforce, find and identify automatically private data. Then once you have that scanning and that mapping, it's much easier to manage. You have to compare that with what you would have to do if you had to do that manually. If you had to manually search your Salesforce databases or your email or what have you, is much more expensive. So here's a case where automation definitely comes to the rescue in a way that is becoming a billion-dollar industry. Before we leave this topic, I thought a visual would help tremendously with understanding how this works. This is my own rendition of a conceptual basis for understanding what's going on. These data discovery tools that are offered by various companies essentially will crawl your system for structured and unstructured data. In unstructured, it's able to go through emails, like the body of an email, or inside a document or a social media post, or maybe onto a Slack site, and identify automatically using machine learning private, sensitive, and confidential information. It can do this with structured as well, whether it's in spreadsheets or relational databases or some other form of perhaps semi-structured data like XML or HTML. And what it does is it takes this information and it stores it and it links it and it tracks it and then is able to protect it. And it's able to do this on an ongoing basis. It can update itself as new data gets put into the enterprise environment. And one of the key areas that it does very well is it links the data. There's machine learning that allows you to take records that look different but are actually the same, so that you can make sure that you have high quality identification of your stored data. So this is, again, a multi-billion dollar industry now, and is becoming really quite the useful tool, perfect example of how um, automation comes to the rescue for something that would otherwise be completely unmanageable. Well, thank you for your time today in exploring this topic of automation with us. Um, we couldn't cover everything, of course. We did look at what automate means versus manual and looked at some examples. We now know what application programming interfaces are and automation platforms. We also did a quick tour of machine learning, unsupervised and supervised, and a very important topic these days of data discovery. Please watch for a video on machine learning, which I think you'll find fascinating, and others that come up. Please do think of us in the context that we've been discussing. We are very well equipped to handle your needs. So thank you again and have a wonderful day.